Welcome to episode 20 of the Carnism Debunked podcast. Believe it or not, this is not actually me speaking, but rather an AI voice imitator replicating my voice and speaking text that I have typed out. While it isn't perfect just yet, I'm sure you'll find that such technology as what you're hearing now opens a whole load of questions about what this could mean for our future. In this episode, my guest Patricia Nonis and I will be discussing various topics regarding AI, its potential, what it means for us as a civilization, and what it could mean for animal rights. Now, Pat, before we start speaking for real, I'll just welcome the AI version of you to the show. So, PatGPT, thanks for coming on. If you'd like to say a few words as the AI version of yourself, then we'll begin the episode.
Thanks, George, for having me on to discuss this with you. I'm really excited to get into this.
All right, yeah, not sure about the posh accent there that the AI thing gave me, but anyway, I think the voice intonation anyway was pretty accurate, and it's quite a good. It's a spooky kind of representation of things to come, right? What did you think?
I really liked it. I didn't actually notice that it was giving you a posh accent until I said it sounded just like you, and you said no, so it shows how much I've across different accents. I thought mine sounded a little bit too American. But...
Yeah, it made you sound a bit American, kind of funny. But yeah, anyway, still kind of weird. And this is just, it's only in its early days at the moment. And I guess we'll be getting into how fast that it's progressing and stuff. But talk to us about your PhD and how you're factoring in. I mean, I just want to say before we start the episode, Pat does not class herself as any kind of sort of expert or anything in AI, but it's definitely an area of interest, and you're doing something to do with it in your PhD, right?
Yeah. So just broadly, I'm definitely not an expert. I will be covering some of it in my PhD, and by the end of the PhD, which is 3 years, I'll probably be a little bit more of an expert, but still not quite there yet. But even the so-called experts in this area are still learning new things every day. So I think you're definitely right in that it's an interest of mine. It's topical. I like to talk about it. And over the past probably 1 or 2 years, maybe 3 years, I've gotten more interested in this area. So in terms of my PhD, I'm looking at, firstly, the harms and benefits that the development of AI can cause to animals. And so far, as we know, technology has mostly been used to harm animals, to restrain them, to exploit them. But I think there's also a potential good upside if we navigate things properly, of how AI and technology in general can benefit the rights of animals. I think that sort of sums it up. I should note that in this area, there is a lot of work being done in the companies and also in academia and research on how AI might harm humans, but there's hardly anything done on how we can protect animals in this area as well. So that's kind of what I would like to touch on too.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into that later. Now, let's start with the basics, because a lot of people in my audience won't know the first thing about AI other than, in fact, they might not have even seen or noticed this, other than they've seen people with their little avatars or whatever, like we've got in the video animation for this podcast, or they might have heard unknowingly like an AI voice before or something like that. But tell us what AI is. What does it stand for? What does it do? What is it?
Yeah, so in its most basic definition, AI is just artificial intelligence. So in this area, we're generally concerned with 2 types of AI, and that's AI, narrow AI, or just AI, usually referred to as, and artificial general intelligence. So artificial intelligence can be kind of anything from a computer, or more advanced AI is something like chess. They're program machines to do a specific task like chess or Go on one of these games, and then they get so good they start beating human grandmasters in chess. So that's kind of narrow AI, where it's programmed to perform a specific task really, really well. AGI we haven't really achieved yet, but basically AGI is meant to learn in a similar way that humans do. So it's not restricted to a specific goal or task, but it kind of learns generally, and it can arguably learn new things by itself and improve by itself. That's kind of more where we're headed.
And what does AGI stand for?
Artificial general intelligence.
Okay, so for example, something like a calculator on your phone, does that count as AI or AGI? Like, what would that come under?
Definitely not AGI. So AGI hasn't really been achieved yet, and that's what the big topic is about. Basically, that's where all the contention is. I think it's sort of a fine line as to when just a general, like vacuum cleaner, that's obviously not AI, as to when it becomes AI. So I don't know, it's hard to sort of draw the line, but if it's, I guess, programmed to do a specific task that's kind of advanced, I would probably consider that AI. And there's robots now that exist that, can communicate in a very basic way that's probably more along the lines of AI. They've learned maybe some subtleties of language and things like that, but I don't think there's any hard and fast rules about when just a general kind of software machine becomes AI. But there's definitely a big gap between when AI becomes AGI, and that's kind of a big question that everyone's concerned about.
Okay, now, because there's been this big influx recently of AI, it's suddenly just been boom, everything's just chucked out there. It's like it's come from nowhere. It's like everything was quiet, and then suddenly, boom, it's just you wake up one day, it must have been a few months ago, and suddenly all this incredible AI stuff is on the internet. There's this ChatGPT where you can ask it to write an essay or something for you. There's all these insane AI like image generators, like the ones we see with our little avatars we've got on the screen now. If you're watching on the YouTube, that is, anyone in the audience. So was AI around before that, or is only now when we're seeing AI, or has anything else throughout our lifetime, like throughout the 90s and early noughties and stuff, has AI been involved in our lives in any way?
So you're right in that in the past, say 5 or 10 years, AI and this move towards this objective to have AGI has made what I would call an aggressive comeback into our society. I haven't really, as I said, I'm not an expert, but I haven't seen anything like this prior to that era. I've seen movies about it, like Terminator. It's almost like, this is a bit of an exaggeration because we're not there yet, but what in the 90s predicted in the movies and pop culture is sort of coming into play now. Because no, I don't think anything like that existed back then, but within the past 5 or 10 years, we're definitely seeing more of that now. So yeah, I don't really know how to explain it. It's just a technological explosion that's sort of happening that we're seeing.
Yeah, and just so, is anything like on our computer or anything on our phone AI, or does none of that count?
I mean, it depends how narrow or how basic you want the definition of AI to be. And I think these kind of definitions are contested in the literature and amongst developers. But I would consider maybe something like, I don't know, when you open Microsoft Word, there used to be this paperclip that comes up.
Yes.
And it's programmed to ask you certain questions, and you can't ask it, for example, why is the sky blue? It's not going to give you a breakdown of Rayleigh scattering or whatever the technical and scientific term is, but it's programmed to answer certain things. So that could be an example of sort of a basic artificial intelligence. Some people would disagree with me on that, but I think there is probably a line between, a toaster and the paperclip, the Microsoft paperclip. So I think AI can be considered to perform certain tasks, and it's got to be got to have a certain level of sophistication. I think it can't just be a stove, So where we draw that line, I'm not comfortable in like confidently saying, but
I get you. Okay, cool. Now, you said a moment ago that the stuff that we've seen in the movies, like Terminator and stuff, for example, that's kind of potentially becoming a reality. What did you mean when you said that?
Well, that's probably an exaggeration, but I just mean in terms of the way some projects or some machines are being developed, for example, in the military, drones, the more advanced weapons in the military and government departments kind of like that get, the more concerning it is that certain functions of AI could be used in that apocalyptic sort of way, which is, I don't want to be doomsday to everyone, but we also need to understand that this topic of AGI and AI falls under the umbrella of a wider topic called existential risk. And that basically covers anything that could wipe out the whole of humanity and all life forms on Earth. So we're talking things like nuclear war, climate change, and a lot of smart people are now saying that the developments in AGI could be number one on the list to wipe out humanity, which is what we're probably going to talk about in a little bit.
Why could AI or AGI, why could that have implications for stuff like nuclear war and stuff like that? How would AI factor into that? Because for the average person listening to this who doesn't really know how this would work, they're not really going to understand, right? Well, how is they see these AI stuff online, like, oh, voice replicators, and oh, look, you can create cool little images of yourself. How is this gonna, how does this have anything to do with like war and stuff?
Yeah, so if we're moving to the topic of existential risk and the more serious kind of discussions that come with AI, I should make a disclaimer, or not disclaimer, I should make a distinction here that we're generally talking about the development of AGI, which hasn't taken place yet, but something like ChatGPT is not exactly AGI, but it's more leaning towards what I think AGI is, which is independent learning more similar to a human, not just programmed to do specific tasks, but can draw on new information and new data. So when we're talking about things like existential risk and the serious harms that can come from AGI, we're generally more talking about AGI, not AI, as in not narrow AI, like basic, computer machines and things like that, or even some, a machine that's programmed to do chess, which I think would still be considered narrow AI. We're talking about artificial general intelligence. So a type of learning entity that can learn new things, it can process new information and self-improve. So to answer your question, how would this be a bad thing for humanity? Because you're right, all we're seeing at the moment is, wow, look how awesome it is at everything. Whether it's avatar, pictures, or even a chat GPT writing Shakespeare poems about animal rights. I know I've asked it to do that a couple of times, and it's quite good, really.
Yeah.
The risk is in creating something that is able to self-improve. And what scientists like, for example, Nick Bostrom, who wrote the book Superintelligence, which is kind of, I don't want to say considered a gospel in this area, but it's a very good general, but also quite in-depth as well, overview of why it's dangerous to create super intelligent machines. He says if we are able to create something that can self-improve, it's going to just get better and better and better. And then there's going to be a stage where, and when this happens, it's not just one guy doing it. It's going to be not millions, but a lot of companies doing this. And if they're creating all these machines that can self-improve, there's going to be what he calls an intelligence explosion, where it just gets so good it surpasses humanity at every important task in nearly every way. And when you think of how, for example, we're currently the dominant species on Earth, how we treat other beings that are lesser intelligent, or we think they're lesser intelligent, less important, we just wipe them out. There's no reason why AGI, if it's developed to self-improve and just be the best at, whatever it can be, there's no reason why it might not do that to us. So that's the general kind of risk. That's the general danger that people are predicting might happen.
When you say AI could self-improve, what does that mean, and how could that happen?
So it hasn't actually happened yet, so I can't give you a specific example, but I can sort of give you a hypothetical that demonstrates the logic behind this concern.
Yeah.
So just say we program an AI to get milk from across the street, and that's all it's programmed to do, and it's programmed to be the best at getting milk from the shop across the street. So it does that every day, and it'll do anything. If there's a squirrel in its way, it'll step on the squirrel. If there's another car coming, it'll just stop the car because it's very strong, and it's just programmed to do this thing and nothing else. And it's programmed to get better at doing this one thing, so it can get faster and faster. It can get, it can just be the supreme at what it does. And if there's an old lady in the way, it'll just wipe the old lady out because it's programmed to do a specific task, and it's programmed to self-improve at the same time. So if you think of it that way, machines that are trained to do a specific task, but also think for themselves in a way, because it's AGI and self-improve, they're not going to consider they may not consider the well-being of those around them. And there's possible solutions to this problem that we can talk about in a little bit. But the main concern is that people are developing these machines and they're aiming towards AGI without any real significant government body looking over things, and without any real knowledge of how it's going to. It could be the best thing ever. Maybe they're programmed to do really nice things and everything lives happily ever after. But from everything I've read about it, it's unlikely it's not going to be any of the problem.
So this hypothetical with the milk machine, that's an AI that just wipes out anything that gets in its way. Let's say I was the designer of that milk machine, and I say, oh, well, I want to stop this thing from now, like, killing the old lady who crosses its path in the street from getting the milk. Are you saying that if I was to go near it and try to repair it or something, it could kill me as well, and that's the problem here?
I mean, yeah, so it depends on how the machine is designed. It depends the level of autonomy the machine has. You might be in a situation where, sure, it's designed to listen to you, but it's also designed to excel. And if it's choosing between those two things, maybe the alignment in it's more stronger towards excelling, and he'll say, oh, I can please my master George later. Maybe that's his rationale, because at this stage, they're going to be a lot of these machines. For example, ChatGPT is built sort of similar to a human brain. Like, they use this thing called neural networks. So a lot of their reasoning might be similar to ours. This is a lot of speculation, and none of this has happened yet, and this is just from what I've read. But they'll have AGI will have a certain amount of autonomy and reasoning skills where it might not do exactly what you've told it to or what you think it's going to do.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the problem. And
so this
it might just be, sorry, just one more thing. So for example, Sam Harris gives the allegory or the example of when we kill ants, we don't kill them out of malice. Even meat eaters don't. It's just they're kind of in the way, and we need to get something done. So if you're really in a rush for work, it's not really going to matter to you if you accidentally stepped on some insect. So you don't do it because you want to hurt them. You do it because you need certain goals done in your life.
Right.
A similar logic. People apply similar logic to understanding how AI could harm us. It might not even be, because it's very unlikely humans are going to program AI to be malicious towards humanity. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of this worry is coming about as a result of, it's incidental. If you're going to create something so sophisticated and so smart, do you know what I'm saying? It's not like we're building robots specifically to kill us.
That is a very interesting analogy, and something I'm totally alien to. So it's kind of like we're not being malicious to the ants, but ultimately we're putting certain goals of our own over the interest of the ant. And we're saying that as vegans who care about ants and stuff, that even you or I, Pat, if we're on a mission to go somewhere today, we know the risk of treading on ants, but we just do it anyway, and we don't let that interfere with our day in any way. And this is for us as vegans, right? So if you now have an artificial intelligence, and that means, let's be specific here, it's almost like an artificial human brain, but without the sentience perhaps, and without certain level of reasoning, but still has reasoning with regards to its own interests, if that makes sense, then this, I guess, is the kind of danger of AI.
Yeah, mostly agree with everything you said. The sentience is a separate debate and separate can of worms that we can get into in a little bit if you want. So let's not do it here though, because it's just gonna be confusing. But yeah, basically that's the concern. And I think it's very arrogant of people to think that, the discrepancy between a human and an ant is so great that it could never match the AGI and the human. But keep in mind, if ChatGPT can do what it does now, imagine what AGI can do in 50 or 100 years. The discrepancy between us and AGI might be even larger than us and an ant. They might be way smarter than us in comparison to how we are smarter than the ant. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Well, of course. I mean, look at this isn't even, like we said earlier, this possibly doesn't even fall under the AI, but even like a calculator or something, you can just type in some insane sum into a calculator, and that and you press equals, and it can get it. So of course, computers as they are more intelligent than humans. It's just about, we have currently more reasoning than computers, if that makes sense, but computers are technically more intelligent than us. Now, if you combine reasoning with the intelligence, this is what's going to turn us into, essentially, we're going to be the new ants, is what you're potentially saying here, Pat. And then AI will rule out. Yeah.
Well, that's one outcome. I remember hearing an amusing description of this. So if AGI might one day, if they have, little AGI kids or something like that, they might be able to solve in one afternoon what Stephen Hawking took, I don't know, his entire life to solve about, or to come up with about black holes or something like that. They just might come home from school and say, I did this in, the afternoon, because the intelligence is just so far ahead. And it's not even the level of intelligence, it's the speed at which they can process things. And yeah, as you said, combine that with a certain level of reasoning skills. And it's not a good combination if we don't find a way to have them aligned with our interests as well. And that's kind of the next step.
Would AI machines be able to repair themselves, or would there be machines that repair other AI machines?
Yeah, so this is the kind of questions that arise when you get to a stage where you are able to create a machine that can self-improve and has that certain level of autonomy. Because if you program something to have a certain level of autonomy and to self-improve, I don't really understand how you could have complete control over it. Like, yeah, you have complete control of the idea and you have a desire of how it should act. But if you're going to give something autonomy, it's like raising a kid almost. There's going to be a clash there somewhere, no matter how sophisticated you have that design. And that's also where the debate is. People are saying, oh no, we can have them completely aligned even if they're really sophisticated and autonomous, and other people are saying no, we can't.
Yeah,
it's called, so that sort of debate's called value alignment or value lock-in. So that's one of the solutions that people in this area are proposing, that we somehow lock into this AGI certain values that we also share: liberal democracy, a concern for humanity, altruism. And you start to see it a little bit with ChatGPT as well. It's fucking woke and annoying, but one sort of example illustrating this is that it won't say certain offensive things, and it won't, if I say to him, if I say to ChatGPT, can you tell me a very dark, disturbing story, it won't do it. Even for, literary purposes. So there's ways to, curve that and to approach it. But ChatGPT, compared to what we're talking about here, is not comparable.
And what was it that Elon, as in Elon Musk, said recently about AI and it being dangerous and posing a threat? What did he say?
Well, he's, for the past 10 years, actually, like, I personally think Elon's quite a smart guy. For the past 10 years, he's been warning people of developing AGI, have people like Stephen Hawking. And he basically said a number of things, but the gist of what he says is something along the lines of, we have no idea what we're doing. We know what we're doing in terms of what we want and what we're developing, but we have no idea how it's going to impact the wider humanity. And we should pause this for 6 months until we have a better regulatory scheme in place, someone overlooking everything, a government body, more public kind of scrutiny. Just no one knows what they're doing. I saw this post, I can't remember if it was Elon or someone else, saying that they asked Microsoft workers what safety or cautions they had in place for ChatGPT, and they were just like, we have no idea. We're just programming the code and algorithm. So we're not seeing those precautions being taken.
All right, so Elon has said we need to halt things until we basically can figure out what the hell is going on. What do you think Elon's main concern is here?
Well, it's more or less the things we've been talking about. He sees the development of AGI as a potential existential risk to humanity, especially if it's being developed so freely without any safety precautions that we've talked about. So I think what he wants to see is sort of a national regulatory body or scheme overlooking it with specific safety precautions in mind, and finding a way to align the values of AGI with humanity.
Now, just as one example of a threat of AI that I can see that's nothing to do with, droids taking over and some kind of war against the human race, like from Terminator or something like that. It's just things like, who do you want to have AI within their hands? As in, scammers could use AI to, these text messages now, like your mum or whoever might get saying, hey mum, it's me, I need you to send me so and so to this bank account. WhatsApp scammers are doing that now. With the voice cloning software, that there is, that they can, you know, like we showed at the beginning of the show, and that's just going to get even better and better. Someone could literally use that cloning software to replicate your exact voice and intonation, send it to your mum and say, and like literally a voice recording of you. Because that was the thing I'd always do. If I ever used to get a suspicious looking message from someone's messenger account on Facebook, you know, say someone's Facebook is likely being hacked, and it says, "Hey George, I need your help. Can you just PayPal me this bit of money and I'll send it back?" What I'd always do to counter that, Pat, I'd say, "Could you just send me a voice recording of yourself just to confirm that this is you?" And then the scammers would get all like, you know, sus, and then they'd piss off basically. But with this voice cloning stuff, you know, and there's even like, we even have the capability of like, we could have AI could generate literal conversations between two people like me and you in the future, that it could literally replicate me and you having a conversation with our own opinions, voices, appearance, intonations, and you probably wouldn't even be able to tell the difference, right? I mean, it's just crazy where this could go.
Yeah, I completely agree. The examples I gave at the start were very extreme, but there's all these in-between kind of developments that could happen as well that are less sort of violent and apocalyptic, but going to damage our society in a very serious way. So I think the one you alluded to is sort of about misinformation as well, because that's a concern with ChatGPT. If people start relying on it as a source of true information and factual, and then something happens and it just starts spewing, you know, the wrong thing, that could be damaging in terms of medical advice and many others. Stuart Russell and Gary Marcus talk about this a little bit as well. Stuart Russell is a professor of computer science at the University of California, and there's kind of just this worry that the more, you know, things like deep fake and fake conversations that sound exactly like you to your mum and all these kind of situations come up, it might just be a place on that the internet might just become a place of just completely fake people, and actual fake, not as in that person's fake, as in fabricated images and visuals and videos and audio of reality. So there's this concern that the internet's kind of the thing for our generation, I think, and for many generations to come. But there's this worry that it's just going to become infiltrated the more advanced AGI gets, where you can't tell the difference between a real speech of Donald Trump and a AGI one of him, which could cause obvious problems.
I mean, there's that, I don't know if you've heard it, that AI conversation between Joe Rogan and Donald Trump. It was like a full Joe Rogan podcast episode with AI Rogan and AI Trump. Have you seen that? I haven't
seen this. No, no. It sounds hilarious.
Now, I don't know if they just typed in the stuff there to get them to say the stuff in their voice, or whether it was a fully AI generated conversation using some more sophisticated software with their own opinions and everything like that, that it just factored into the AI. But either way, it was crazy. Like you would have no idea listening to it that wasn't Trump or Joe Rogan. It just was them talking. It's crazy.
Yeah. People see this now. They see the avatars and the AI pictures and the Joe Rogan and Donald Trump, and it's hilarious. You know, it's so funny, and they think, how could this possibly go wrong? But there, as we've been discussing, there's just a million ways where this could be used, not as something entertaining and lighthearted, but seriously undermine our society. Now,
we've heard talk of an intelligence explosion. That's a term that people use with regards to AI. Now, most people hearing that, they would think that sounds fantastic. Oh, amazing. Our species, we're going to encounter an intelligence explosion. Fucking finally. I mean, it sounds great for vegans, doesn't it? But why is this scary? What is meant by intelligence explosion, and why is this somehow a potentially bad thing?
Yeah, so as mentioned earlier, when we refer to the intelligence explosion, generally what we're referring to is a situation where we've programmed AGI to self-improve. So it just keeps doing that, and it does it to the extent where it starts to surpass human intelligence in every conceivable way. So not just math as in the calculator, not just, writing ChatGPT for most people, but in every manner you could think of, law, science, medicine, it just starts getting supremely good at all these things, to the point where humans might just become redundant because of the lack of training they've had or the lack of alignment with them. If we don't align our values with them, that could be a threat as well, and all the other aspects that we've been talking about. But yeah, basically it's just, if you train things to be really, really smart, it's going to be a threat to you at some point. It's quite a simple concept, really.
So how high a chance do you think it will be that AI would replace our jobs in the future, or at least replace most jobs? And what if, say, we had a world where AI was just like a key thing, a key part of the world? What sort of jobs do you think would exist, and what sort of jobs do you think wouldn't exist anymore?
Yeah, so I don't want to be, the angel of gloom and doom and say it's definitely going to take over and everyone's going to be dead. But I think one concern here is that we're already seeing AI surpass humans at a lot of things. One important method in which it does this is the creation of antibiotics. Like, they've found that AI is just quicker at identifying scientific properties that you need for a specific kind of drug. So it's used in a lot of creation of different medicines. So that's one example. But there are plenty of others in terms of maybe like editing and other roles where it's just going to get better at humans. And a lot of industries now, especially in things like publishing, even some aspects of law, it's just getting more automated because they don't need humans to do a job a machine can do. So I think we're already seeing roles becoming redundant in society for people, and jobs being made redundant because it's cheaper and easier to, why pay someone $30 an hour when you could just get a machine to do something 20 of your staff would do.
Now, let's give one example here. The construction industry. Could it be the chance that, say, in 100 years' time, or whenever it might be, there'd be no such thing as construction workers? We would just have robots build every building.
It could be a possibility. I don't know everything. I don't know much about construction, but from what I've seen, the movements kind of needed, it doesn't seem impossible. Like, I've seen robots that make coffee because they're programmed to do, their arms are meant to go a certain way and to a certain length.
Yeah.
And it makes the coffee perfectly well. So goodbye baristas, so if they get really, really good at certain things, there's no reason why, especially in a capitalist society like ours, people won't want to utilize that.
What about stuff like does self-driving cars count as AI?
Yeah, it could. So yeah, I think a lot of things would count as narrow AI, as we defined before. So AI, the basic function that we're talking about now is narrow AI, and what we're talking about more sophisticated is AGI, artificial general intelligence. So something like, do you use Uber?
Yeah.
So when you choose you say where you are and then you're choosing your destination, it's actually AI that hooks everything up. So there's no person sitting at the sitting in an office saying, oh, George wants to keys here, now he goes here. That would just take forever, and I couldn't do that with that app.
Yeah.
So that's actually a type of AI generating communications with the driver and then to you, and then it's finding you and the driver and connecting you two together. So that's one example of AI. I'm not sure about self-driving cars. Probably a lot of people consider that narrow AI, but I'm not across like where the threshold is with that.
Sure. What do you think, because you mentioned this earlier towards the start of the podcast, what do you think the implications of AI are for animal rights? Because this is our field now. We're both animal rights activists and we're doing a podcast about AI. So let's talk about this. How will AI impact animal rights?
It's so unclear now because we're even just speculating how it's going to impact humans. And that's where most of the research and speculation is being done at. I think there's been 2 research papers published on how AI might impact animals, one by Peter Singer and another one by a woman, Christine Parker, co-authored with someone else. I forget, if I remember, I'll send you the name. So it's so unknown. And that's why it's so important, I think, more people in academia and in these companies be aware that it's not just our fate that's on the line. There's other living beings on the earth that we need to consider as well. Because if we're so unprotected, I think animals are going to be even, at least there's some people talking, important, powerful people talking about what the fuck we need to do about this. But there's no one, as usual, defending the interests of animals.
So could AI not help animals in any way? Or are you saying because we live in a carnist world, AI is ultimately more likely going to be in the wrong hands, i.e. in the hands of carnists, and therefore when it comes to things about animal rights, there might not be much we could do in a world dominated by AI?
It's a difficult question because so much is unknown, but it's not that AI can't do anything for animals. It's just, one, I don't think humans will program them that way unless there is a big shift to veganism and unless we see the movement take off properly. I think it's just going to be complete indifference. And whatever danger AI possesses to humans, I think it's going to be tenfold for animals because there's going to be absolutely no laws or protections or any real interest in defending animals because everyone's too worried about themselves.
Yeah.
And even when, as I said, even when people talk about the harms of AI and it's getting more traction now, it's always about how to protect humanity. There's nothing ever said about non-human animals because we're a very selfish species, and that's the whole concern. If we're programming them to be like us in some way, they're going to replicate certain behaviors that we have unless we take the precautions that I spoke of to avoid that. But having said that, the bigger question is, can AGI benefit both animals and humans? So one way is value alignment, which is to lock in values that are aligned with ours. So as I said, liberal democracy, a sense of fairness, altruism, helping rather than harming. But the other way is just to become more like AGI ourselves. So that's an area known as transhumanism. I don't know if we've ever actually spoken of this, but I'm actually quite a fan. I think if we're either fucked or not fucked, we might as well take every precaution to be not fucked. So transhumanism is basically just becoming more like cyborgs and surpassing human limitations. So one example of that, well, some people already say we're already on the way there. We spend most of the times on our phone, like our phone knows us better than we know ourselves. We're already using gadgets to improve our health and life. So if I break a hip tomorrow, I'm just going to pay the surgery and get a new hip. One day we might be able to, upload our consciousness to another brain. And so there's all these different ideas about how to surpass human limitations. And personally, I think it's also a viable route to go down. Especially, a lot of people are actually interested in just these ideas of living forever, surpassing death. And I read recently there's nothing biologically stopping that. Like death is not a biological inevitability. So
well, there's
that.
there's that immortal jellyfish, isn't there, that can reverse their own telomeres or something, is it? So they reverse their aging. There's that jellyfish that literally lives forever. So
That's awesome.
It is a possibility because when we get there's probably scientists in the audience shouting at me for getting this wrong now, but I think it's our telomeres that get shorter as we age or something like that, which is ultimately the aging process and how our body ages and decays, and then suddenly death. And there are animals already in the animal kingdom who can actually reverse that process and literally live forever, like infinity years. Wow. So this is an actual possibility already, even not to do with robots and stuff like that. So if humans figure out how to do that with the human body, immortal, eternal life, it absolutely is a possibility. We'll all turn into elves from Lord of the Rings and be living in Rivendell forever. We'll be the immortal ones.
I don't know if you know David Pierce. I had him on my channel recently and we did a bit of a discussion video together, and he advocates for similar ideas, that there's ways to achieve infinite happiness with medicine, with AI, with gene modification. So it seems like a scary and new concept, but if you told someone, 500 years ago we're going to Mars on rockets and we might colonize it, that's a scary concept. If you told them we would be sitting at home on looking at small gadgets and doing all the things we do now, it all seems really scary. But we also need to be aware of the natural fallacy. So I think that applies here as well. Just because it seems unnatural doesn't mean it's not good for you. And if it means there's a chance at combating this big existential risk and protecting animals, I think it's a good thing.
I do know of Pierce. I don't know much about him. I'll have to check out the thing you did with him because I haven't seen that yet. And I'll tell you what, I'll put it in the links as well below so people can check that out. I think maybe is he vegan, Pierce?
Yeah, he is vegan, and
Yeah.
he is often credited for bringing, well, vice versa, more vegans into the transhumanist philosophy and more transhumans into being vegan.
Yeah.
Because it's this whole idea that we can surpass sentient human or animal limitations through science and technology. And he wants to achieve what you call infinite bliss, because he thinks suffering is completely unnecessary. So it was a really interesting conversation I got to have with him, because what I really wanted to ask him about was, what does he think of this idea that maybe not like horrendous suffering and not factory farming or the Holocaust or something, but what about this idea that some kind of suffering is necessary for a meaningful life? So we got to discuss the dynamics of that, and he sort of convinced me that it wasn't at the end of it. Just something that we're trying to do to cope with, but he said there's no reason why you can't have a meaningful life and be a great person and do amazing things, even more so without suffering, which he thinks is just what did he call it as? It's just a nightmare of our genetic past. Hopefully it'll be one day.
Did you talk about how we need pain in order to say, like, don't do this action? For example, like you're sitting on a pin, so you need to go out and get off, because otherwise you've got a pin in your ass.
Not specifically that.
Maybe I'll ask him that.
I asked him questions in the same kind of curiosity.
Yeah.
And he had answers for some. He sort of said, oh, that's a good question, I'm going to think about it more. But I asked him questions along those lines. One question I had was, if the end goal is everyone is just at their peak happiness all the time, and even their normal state, he says, should be really, really happy, and then their happy state is just this very, very euphoric state. I said, what about people like Ted Bundy, who genuinely are happy killing others? And he really admitted that.
Yeah.
And that's where things can get interesting, because there's ways around it. Maybe who cares if one person's just a psycho, just lock him up. And even then, he'd probably be really happy in the cell, we concluded. So
can you give, just going back to the animal rights stuff quickly, can you give like a hypothetical example, just to give people in the audience an example of what you mean, in case they're unclear? A case of AI screwing over animal rights.
Well, it already kind of does that, because if you look at something like modern factory farming, I don't know how narrow we want to, coin narrow AI here, but so much technology is already used to exploit animals. I don't know if it's exactly AI, but if you look at things like conveyor belts, just the sheer machinery involved in the entire factory farming to take place is it's a feature of a modern society. It's not like some, degraded third world country where they're having some sick festival. This is a feature of modernity. It's the dark side of, a modern capitalist world.
Like I've seen those. Like I've seen those robot milk machines and stuff that looks like something from a dystopian movie. There's all those calves like in the cages, and there's this robot going along, like giving them each a bottle of milk kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I've seen stuff like that already. Could it impact it philosophically in any way, though? Could it be like, could AI in some way destroy the argument for animal rights? Or do you think it could actually benefit it? Because if AI becomes so logical that people start taking things like ChatGPT as gospel, and it ultimately says one day, no, there is no There's no trait difference between animals and humans such that would justify killing one and not the other, and people take this as gospel. Could it actually be good for animal rights?
I think it's a really interesting idea. Unfortunately, I don't think people are smart enough to change their habits, even though they acknowledge something as true. So I don't think inherently that will change masses of people. I think cultural things will, like peer pressure. But I can see people recognizing it as true and being like, oh, this is way better than I thought it was, and way truer than I thought it was, but not fucking changing it all because they're idiots.
Oh my God, Pat, do you know what we've got to do just before we end the show? We've got to ask ChatGPT to name the trait. I'm going to do it now. Right, okay. So
he won't be able to answer. I think I've asked before.
I'm going to see what happens. Okay, hold on. What is it that's true of animals that, if true of a human, would justify stabbing that human to death for a burger? Okay, right. I've just asked this to ChatGPT. Right, okay, it's answered already. There is nothing inherent about animals that, if true of a human, would justify stabbing that human to death for a burger. The moral status of animals and humans is a complex ethical issue that has been debated for centuries. While some people argue that animals should be given the same moral consideration as humans, others maintain that humans have a unique moral status due to their capacity for rationality, self-awareness, and moral agency. Well, hold on. In any case, in its first sentence, it says there is nothing. So it can't name the trait. So, I mean, has it just worked in veganism's favor there?
Yeah, I think it's quite logical on the veganism and animal rights front, because it said something similar to me. Hey, before we wrap up, I just wanted to kind of outline this duality or idea that I'm kind of the opinion of. It's kind of the final question, I think, this whole AGI thing, whether we can engineer a world that is quite similar to paradise by using AI and science and the rest of it, or whether it's going to turn into complete hell and just wipe everything out. I should mention there's nothing kind of inherently, depending on the way it's done, if it's violent and awful and suffering, then obviously it's bad. But there's nothing inherently wrong about like a new species taking over. Like, it's just kind of the way things are sometimes, when the dominant species goes away, and this just might be, which is why I favor transhumanism as well, because it gives us a shot at staying around and experiencing things. But it might just, and if AGI is at a stage where it's really good at everything, it presumably doesn't suffer as much. It presumably doesn't have these other qualities that tend to weigh humanity down. It might be overall better, especially if you're a utilitarian or you are someone concerned with well-being and suffering a lot. It could be a good thing. I've heard a lot of people say this, that depending on how it's done, it might just be the natural course of things that a superior, species, in a sense. We didn't actually get to talk about sentience and consciousness within AI, but that's a debated kind of topic as well. I don't know if you want to get into that now, if it's kind of a separate video.
Yeah, it could be a separate thing. Maybe we could do that on your channel or something like that. But that does sound like a good topic to discuss. I mean, in any case, we both believe, right, that sentience gives rise to individual rights. So if AI ever became sentient, we would want those sentient machines to have rights, I presume, right?
Yeah, I think they'll probably have more rights than us by the end of it, but yes.
The thing you said
That's
about
the idea.
Yeah, and the thing you said about creating like a paradise on Earth kind of thing. Have you seen that Black Mirror episode, San Junipero?
No, but that's not going to have a good take on paradise, because it's all about how the bad side of technology. So.
Well, no, you might. It's Black Mirror shows. I'd say San Junipero is a more positive sort of episode.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it's not it's not really a dystopian episode. Every single Black Mirror episode is really, really different to each other. So yeah, I would say to anyone who's interested in seeing like a fictional episode about like AI perhaps, or technology creating some kind of paradise, watch that Black Mirror episode. It's called San Junipero. Pat, just before we end, did you want to say any final words about anything just before we end the show?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we've spent the majority of this episode talking about the harms AI might cause and how it's situated in existential risk, but I'm truly sort of agnostic on this. I'm leaning towards things are going to go bad because humans. Yeah. But I'm also open to the idea, and I do hope that we overcome it and utilize it in a way that's going to help both animals and humans. I think transhumanism is a promising route, and I just wanted to say that it's not just. I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen, and it's a nuanced take, and I hope it doesn't. All
right, it's not totally all doom and gloom then, perhaps. All right, well, PatGPT, aka Patricia Nonis, thank you so much for joining me today, and we hope you all enjoyed listening to the show.
Thanks, George. It was really fun.